Namaste, Dandava Pranam. By the instruction and grace of our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Sripad, Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj, we are here reading Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 3, the Status Quo, Chapter 27, Text 26. Evam vidita tatvasya pakritir mai manasam yunjato na pakuruta atmarmasya karhichit. The influence of the material nature cannot harm an enlightened soul, even though he engages in material activities, because he knows the truth of the Absolute and his mind is fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Lord Kapila says that Mahi Manasam, a devotee whose mind is always fixed upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is called Atma Rama, or Vidita Tattva. Atma Rama means one who rejoices in the self, or one who enjoys the spiritual atmosphere. Atma, in the material sense, means the body or the mind, but when referring to one whose mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, Atma Rama means one who is fixed in spiritual activities in relationship with the Supreme Soul. The Supreme Soul is this personality of Godhead, and the individual soul is the living entity. When they engage in reciprocation of service and benediction, the living entity is said to be in the Atma Rama position. This Atma Rama position can be attained by one who knows the truth as it is. The truth is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the enjoyer, and that the living entities are meant for his service and enjoyment. One who knows this truth and who tries to engage all resources in the service of the Lord escapes all material reactions and influences of the modes of material nature. An example may be cited in this connection. Just as a materialist engages in constructing a big skyscraper, a devotee engages in constructing a big temple for Vishnu. Superficially, the skyscraper constructor and temple constructor are on the same level, for both are collecting wood, stone, iron, and other building materials. But the person who constructs a skyscraper is a materialist, and the person who is constructing a temple of Vishnu is Atma Rama. The materialist tries to satisfy himself in relation to his body by constructing a skyscraper, but the devotee tries to satisfy the super self, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by constructing a temple. Although both are engaged in association of material activities, the devotee is liberated and the materialist is conditioned. This is because the devotee who is constructing the temple has fixed his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the non-devotee who is constructing a skyscraper has his mind fixed in sense gratification. If while performing any activity, even in material existence, one's mind is fixed upon the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead, one will not be entangled or conditioned. The worker in devotional service, in full Krishna consciousness, is always independent of the influence of material nature. Text 27. Yadhaivam adhyatmarata kalena bahu janmana sarvatra jata vairagya abrahma bhuvananmuni. When a person thus engages in devotional service and self-realization for many years and births, he becomes completely reluctant to enjoy any one of the material planets, even up to the highest planet, which is known as Brahmaloka. He becomes fully developed in consciousness. Purport. Anyone engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as a devotee, but there is a distinction between pure devotees and mixed devotees. A mixed devotee engages in devotional service for the spiritual benefit of being eternally engaged in the transcendental abode of the Lord in full bliss and knowledge. In material existence, when a devotee is not completely purified, he expects material benefit from the Lord in the form of relief from material miseries where he wants material gain, advancement in knowledge of the relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity, or knowledge as to the real nature of the Supreme Lord. When a person is transcendental to these conditions, he is called a pure devotee. He does not engage himself in the service of the Lord for any material benefit or for understanding the Supreme Lord. His one interest is that he loves the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he spontaneously engages in satisfying him. The highest example of pure devotional service is that of the gopis in Vrindavan. They are not interested in understanding Krishna, but only in loving him. That platform of love is the pure state of devotional service. Unless one is advanced to this pure state of devotional service, there is a tendency to desire elevation to a higher material position. A mixed devotee may desire to enjoy a comfortable life on another planet with a greater span of life, such as on Brahmaloka. These are material desires, but because a mixed devotee engages in the service of the Lord, ultimately, after many, many lives of material enjoyment, he undoubtedly develops Krishna consciousness. And the symptom of his Krishna consciousness is that he's no longer interested in any sort of materially elevated life. He does not even aspire to become a personality like Lord Brahma. Text 28 through 29. Madbhakta pratibhudharto matprasadhena bhuyasa Nihrishya samstanam Kaivalyakyam mad ashrayam Prapnoti hanjasadhira Svadrishya china samshaya Yadgatvana nivartita Yogi lingad vinhirgame. My devotee actually becomes self-realized by my unlimited causeless mercy. And thus, when freed from all doubts, he steadily progresses towards his destined abode, which is directly under the protection of my spiritual energy of unadulterated bliss. That is the ultimate perfectional goal of the living entity. After giving up the present material body, the mystic devotee goes to that transcendental abode and never comes back. Purport. Actual self-realization means becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. The existence of a devotee implies the function of devotion and the object of devotion. Self-realization ultimately means to understand the personality of Godhead and the living entities, to know the individual self and the reciprocal exchanges of loving service between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity is real self-realization. This cannot be attained by the impersonalists or other transcendentalists. They cannot understand the science of devotional service. Devotional service is revealed to the pure devotee by the unlimited causeless mercy of the Lord. This is especially spoken of here by the Lord, mat prasadhena, by the special grace. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Only those who engage in devotional service with love and faith receive the necessary intelligence from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that gradually and progressively they can advance to the abode of the Personality of Godhead. Nishrashyasa means the ultimate destination. Svasamstana indicates that the impersonalists have no particular place to stay. The impersonalists sacrifice their individuality so that the living spark can merge into the impersonal effulgence emanating from the transcendental body of the Lord. But the devotee has a specific abode. The planets rest in the sunshine, but the sunshine itself has no particular resting place. When one reaches a particular planet, then he has a resting place. The spiritual sky, which is known as Kaivalya, is simply blissful light on all sides, and it is under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 14.27, Brahmano hi patistaham, the impersonal Brahman effulgence rests on the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, bodily effulgence. The bodily effulgence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Kaivalya, or impersonal Brahman. In that impersonal effulgence, there are spiritual planets which are known as Vaikunthas, chief of which is Krishna Loka. Some devotees are elevated to Vaikuntha planets, and some are elevated to the planet Krishna Loka. According to the desire of the particular devotee, he is offered a particular abode, which is known as Svastamstana, his desired destination. By the grace of the Lord, the self-realized devotee engaged in devotional service understands his destination even while in the material body. Therefore, he performs his devotional activities steadily, without doubting, and after quitting his material body, he at once reaches the destination for which he has prepared himself. After reaching that abode, he never comes back to this material world. The words lingad nirgame, which are used here, mean after being freed from two kinds of material bodies, subtle and gross. The subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, false ego, and contaminated consciousness, and the gross body is made of five elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. When one is transferred to the spiritual world, he gives up both the subtle and gross bodies of this material world. He enters the spiritual sky in his pure spiritual body and is stationed in one of the spiritual planets. Although the impersonalists also reach that spiritual sky after giving up the subtle and gross bodies, material bodies, they are not placed in the spiritual planets. As they desire, they are allowed to merge into the spiritual effulgence emanating from the transcendental body of the Lord. The word Svastamstanam is also very significant. As a living entity prepares himself, so he attains his abode. The impersonal Brahman effulgence is offered to the impersonalists, but those who want to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his transcendental form, as Narayan in the Vaikunthas or with Krishna in Krishna Loka, go to those abodes, wherefrom they never return. Text 30. Yadhana yogo pachitasu cheto mayasu siddhasya visajatenga ananya het suvata megatisyad atyantiki yatrana mrityuhasa. When a perfect yogi's attention is no longer attracted by the byproducts of mystic yoga, which are manifestations of the external energy, his progress towards me becomes unlimited, and thus the power of death cannot overcome him. Purport. Yogis are generally attracted to the byproducts of mystic yoga power, for they can become smaller than the smallest or greater than the greatest, achieve anything they desire, have power even to create a planet or bring anyone they like under their subjection. Yogis who have incomplete information of the result of devotional service are attracted by these powers. But these powers are material. They have nothing to do with spiritual progress. As other material powers are created by the material energy, mystic yoga powers are also material. A perfect yogi's mind is not attracted by any material power, but is simply attracted by unalloyed service to the Supreme Lord. For a devotee, the process of merging into the Brahman effulgence is considered to be hellish, and yogic power, or the preliminary perfection of yogic power, to be able to control the senses, is automatically achieved. As for elevation to higher planets, a devotee considers this to be simply hallucinatory. A devotee's attention is concentrated only upon the eternal loving service of the Lord, and therefore the power of death has no influence over him. In such a devotional state, a perfect yogi can attain the status of immortal knowledge and bliss. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd Canto, 27th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Understanding Material Nature. And thus ends our reading for today. We'll continue on Monday from chapter 28, Kapila's instructions on the execution of devotional service. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Srila Guru Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, Srila Acharya Dev, Srila Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the worldwide devotees. Sama Bhaktivedanta Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Nishangapali Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Bharat Subhadra Jagannath Ju Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai. Sham Kund Radha Kund Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi, Bhakti Devi, Vrinda Devi Ki Jai, Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan Yagi Ki Jai, Scientific Sankirtan Yagi Ki Jai, Princeton Bhaktivedanta Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Institute Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Mat Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Hari, Jai Shrimati Uma Devidasi Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.